Make great meals anytime with Carnivalt.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Randy Nance, Green Beret extraordinaire. Beside him, our in-house CIA operative, Jeff MD, also a great author. And we have a new guest tonight, Jonathan Lyons, who has a ton of mutual contacts with us, including Sheriff Mark Lamb. Jonathan, could you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Chris. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Jonathan Lyons. I'm the former chairman of the Arizona Republican Party, and then been working as a border consultant for the last few years, part of an organization called the Border Security Alliance, where I chair that board, working with state, local, and federal law enforcement to ensure security at the border, also food security as well. And I'm currently an elected county supervisor. And on other areas, that may be commissioners, but here we call them supervisors. Father of 11. Let's throw that in there.
Yeah, and thank you. I mean, you wear a ton of hats. It's super, super impressive, and really appreciate you joining us tonight. So I just want to quickly mention that if you go to survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up for a free account, you'll get our Saturday watch guide, which has links to everything we publish through the week. The number one way that big tech suppresses us and other channels is by not sending notifications, either emails or in the app. And actually, we had another email today from somebody. The phenomenon of clicking on the thumbs up button and it doing nothing is back on YouTube for some of our users. So
wow.
Yeah, the suppression is real for sure. Other than that, our main topic tonight is the long-term cost of the Biden open border policy, Mayorkas, Obama, whoever you want to blame for it. But it's going to have long-term consequences. And you have to forgive me. I can't remember everything. I don't have Alzheimer's. I got Sometimers. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. So sometimes it's better that I actually have some show notes with me. But basically, we let down our defenses. I don't know what numbers to believe as far as how many people were let into the country. We know a ton of them were, known terrorists, known criminals. And this is not something that's going to change overnight. As a matter of fact, it took 4 years to happen, and I don't think we can clean it up in 4 years. But that's just my topic. Or my position, pardon me. So, Jonathan, I'd like to hear your 10,000-foot view of the problem, then Jeff, then Randy, and then we'll jump into the first article.
Well, we first started seeing kind of the border challenges along the time that Obama came into office. And then we started seeing a rise in the trafficking of fentanyl and human trafficking. It got so bad and briefly that our sheriff, because the U.S. Attorney General would not prosecute, that our sheriff deputized federal law enforcement to be able to prosecute at a county level. I was serving as a county chairman at that time. And then we had the Haitians and other massive groups that were coming across at different times together, kind of wreaking havoc on the system that we have here in Yuma. We're a small community. We're an agriculture and military community. We have 2 military bases, Yuma Proving Ground and Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. Marine Corps Air Station Yuma is critical as far as the National Defense Network, because we host weapons and tactical instruction. So it's the Marine Top Gun instruction every 6 months. The open range, or some of the areas where they practice live fire exercises, are directly on the border. So that was impacted as we had people coming across. It wreaked havoc on our healthcare system, where we had a hospital that was overrun that couldn't attend to the needs of the people here in the community. They still have an auditable debt of over $30 million, seeking reimbursement on a federal level because this was inflicted by the Biden administration. It affected our 911, our first responders. So across the board, we had a compounding trauma event that unfolded and was like a roller coaster. We had an effect on our women's and children's assistance center. So we have 3,000 victims a year that come in for assistance, and they can be from domestic violence and or other things. And we had we had a lot of people brought in by Border Patrol or reporting directly there who had been violated by the cartel somewhere along the border on their way to Yuma. And that was exacerbated by the fact that the federal funding, which is not tax related. It's under the Victims of Crime Advocate, or the VOCA. During COVID, they weren't holding any courtroom um, proceedings, and so funds weren't being collected, and they were not being dispersed throughout the United States, but specifically for that fund. So our community and our state had to step up a little bit more. And then our food bank was affected by the people that were coming across. People weren't reporting directly to the food bank, but they were going to our auxiliary um, groups here in Yuma that receive assistance from the food bank. And so across the board, we had challenges. If it wouldn't have been for a couple of the local non-governmental entities, and not the bad national ones that were taking advantage of situations, but the local ones who are part of our community that helped us facilitate, we would have had a million extra people living in Yuma, Arizona, in a community of 125,000. That's the average, and to have a million roughly come through here over that 4-year time frame. I think it was actually a little bit more, because you need to account for the gotaways, which Border Patrol says is about 25%. So we're still reeling from those effects. Not everybody has recovered. It's going to take some while to absorb a lot of the losses that occurred during that time. And I got to give a shout out to the men and women in uniform, the green, the blue, and then the local law enforcement. They did everything that they could to provide security while while the border was overrun. Our high was like 1,800 and something documented per day, but that was at the beginning when there was no way to uh, process people in a timely fashion in a center that was meant to process maybe 100 people a day. So we had people walking into the community and walking directly into the sheriff's office and a Mexican consulate and churches, seeking assistance. You may have some questions from that, but that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of as far as what happened over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I appreciate that. JJ Carroll, who our channel is really familiar with, has told us multiple horror stories of, he was CBP agent for 23 years, special agent, pardon me, of young girls and women's undergarments being found along the border from these women who've been raped, empty boxes of the morning after pill, those sort of things, just horrifying beyond all belief. And I cannot relate to a million people coming into your area of 125,000. The best I can do is 20 years ago, during the heyday of Bike Week, we live in Volusia County on the east coast of Florida, and our population at the time was, say, 585,000, and we would have 600,000 people from out of our county, a lot of Floridians, but also around the rest of the country, and you couldn't move. Like, traffic was just insane. And Jeff knows, because he was in this area for a period of time, and that's only going, double. You got almost 10 times. That's incomprehensible, the strain that it would put on your community. And we'll get into more of that, I'm sure, as we go through some of the stuff in the brief here. You'll have lots of anecdotal examples. Jeff first, then Randy. Want to hear your 10,000 foot view on this. What are the long-term costs, essentially, is the main point.
Well, there's the financial cost, the fiscal cost of dealing with all this, and now the cost of deporting them. But I think the cost to the country is the changing of our social fabric. When we've had huge times of immigration in the past, in the 1840s, 1880s, and there, millions of people came into this country, but they came in with a different purpose. They came to settle the country. We had vast swaths of open land in the Midwest and in the Great Plains that needed farmers, and they were looking for an opportunity to own their own farms, to start their own farms and businesses and raise families and assimilate. And my great grandfather came from Germany, and and his wife, was my great grandmother. She spoke no English, but she insisted that my grandfather speak English and only English. And they would have bilingual conversations where she would speak to him in German and he would answer her in English, because he didn't speak German, but he could understand it. But their whole thing is, you're in America, you're going to become an American now. And they did. And that happened over and over again because those people came here to settle, not to take advantage of a system, not to cash a check, not to get free stuff, but to work hard and establish their own lives. I'm not seeing that with a lot of the people coming in now. Yeah, they like it here and it's better than where they came from. But they come in, the first thing they do is they open out, they put the palm of their hand out and say, gimme. And that's not what it's about. And a lot of them are just criminals and they're just coming here. It's like, well, better to rob a rich person than a poor person. You know, that's when you get MS-13 and Tren de Agua. This is just fertile fields for them.
So just to put a fine point on this, we've mentioned this before, the GAO says that the annual cost to the American taxpayer for illegals is $451 billion, which would make it line item number 3 on the federal budget. But of course, that money's not all just from the feds. My personal opinion is if the GAO says it's $451 billion, it's probably $1 trillion. And then the next number, and I'm surprised that it's this low, I would expect it to be higher, is that approximately $60 billion per year that illegals are paid, they send back to their home country. So that's leaving our country as well.
Yeah.
Randy, I mean, everybody, not so much me anymore since I'm not in Texas anymore, but the 3 of you are kind of on the front lines of what happened over the past 4 years. Give us the Texas perspective, Randy. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yep. I think both Jonathan and Jeff have covered a good portion of it, because really it's all a lot of it's going to be financial. You know what it's already cost for them to take charge of these folks, put them up in hotels and everything they've been doing that we know now that's been going on for the past 4 years. But you also, have to look at Germany and we have to look at Europe. They did this before us. So all we have to do is look over and see what's happened to them right now. That is what the cost is going to be. And, it's not just financial, it's cultural. It's going to be a big deal. We have a couple of cities here in Texas, or there's a neighborhood apparently outside of Plano, Texas, and it's a huge neighborhood. It's got a big, beautiful mosque, but you have to be Muslim to even move into the neighborhood, which is discrimination right there in itself. And apparently that's going to be like their little hub. So that's the kind of thing that you're going to get. They're not going to come here to assimilate. They're coming here. You either got the people like you just discussed, they're coming here with their hands out, and that's most of them by the droves. But you're also going to have some professionals come in, right? And now they're going to want to take over their own little area. Let's say just like that Plano. Let's take Dearborn, Michigan. I haven't been there recently, but from what I hear, none of us would even recognize it if you drove around there. It doesn't look like America anymore because it's not. Because guess who now all the elected officials are? And once you have them as elected officials, then they start changing legislation and laws, right? So there's a huge cost. And again, we don't know. It's 10, 20 million. We don't know how many folks came in. Trying to get them out is also, and you talk about the crime rate. I mean, we could probably sit here and do the whole show on what the cost would be. It's going to be significant. And, right now it seems like we're trying to get ahead of it, but we know a lot of folks are still dragging their feet and they're not helping this administration get the job done. So, I guess we'll see where this goes here in the next year or two for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a mission. I mean, when this topic comes up and I think long-term cost, I ask myself, how many more Lake and Rileys are there going to be as a result of this? And those are completely unnecessary rapes and deaths, and the other side likes to say that, well, the undocumented migrants, the illegals, they commit crimes at a far lower rate than Americans do, but they shouldn't even be here. These crimes shouldn't be happening is the crux of the matter. Number one. Number two, what you're describing on the north side of DFW, Plano and Irving area in particular, Irving, started having an explosion of Muslims 20 plus years ago, probably 30 years now, actually. And there are sections of Irving where you are absolutely a minority if you're a WASP.
No. So I spent a good portion of my time that I lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth before the military in Irving. You couldn't pay me to live there now. You couldn't 100%. Pay me to live there. And,
So-
yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Quick anecdotal story. 2003, I was in Dearborn doing some work for Ford, and I had an early generation GPS in it, and I got lost. I couldn't find the hotel, and the hotel was literally across the interstate from the Ford campus. And I ended up in this mall parking lot, and there was a cop in every single row of this parking lot. So finally, I rolled up to one, I rolled the window down, and I said, can you tell me where this hotel is? And he looks at me and says, son, you follow me. So I followed him, and it was only a mile away or so. And he gets out of his car when I get there, and he says, you're not from here, are you? I said, no, not at all. I'm just here for work. And he said, don't go over there at all. He said, white people don't go in that part of Dearborn. Bad things will happen to you. And it was literally the Ritz-Carlton was the hotel. It was a high-end hotel 1 mile away. It was Mogadishu. Like it was that brutal. It was a serious eye opener. Speaking of eye openers, I had an issue with my main camera tonight. I had to swap it out, and y'all probably don't recognize me. I lost 30 pounds in the past 24 hours since we did the last episode.
Congratulations.
I love this camera. It's fantastic. I'm going to have to use it from now on. So I'm going to pull up the first article here, because this will frame the conversation as absolutely astonishing numbers. And I think the numbers are probably higher than what we're seeing here, but this is directly from CBP, and these are the numbers. And if you look at fiscal years going forward, and you have several different categories, but if you go to total enforcements here, encounters at least, you go from 646,000 in 20 to almost 2 million in 21, 2.7 in 22, 3.2 in 23, and then 2.9 in 24, pardon me. And if you also look at the number of rescues, so illegals entering the country who needed assistance, that number spiked as well. But this chart in particular is absolutely astonishing. And I think it speaks to what you mentioned, Jonathan, with regards to the explosion of people in your county.
I know that these are the official numbers, but when I look at them, I see them as grossly underreported.
That's where I was going with this, because I'd actually like to hear from all three of you what you think these numbers are. I can tell you that when we've had JJ Carroll on multiple times, that his numbers are somewhere between 30 and 50 million during the 4 years of the Biden administration. That's a staggering number.
And his is probably a much more educated guess, but I put it around 22 million.
Okay.
Looking at some official reports and talking with high-level officials within DHS. I even had the opportunity to sit down with my Yorkist in Yuma and close up 9 of 11 sections. We did get more wall under Biden. I'm going to have to give credit where credit's due, but we got a little bit there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jeff, then Randy, just curious. I mean, take a stab at it. What do you think the actual number is?
Well, I'm thinking it's probably closer to 30 million. When I was down working the border in Texas, this was during the Obama administration. It was bad then, but nothing like it as bad as it got. But having spent 26 years in federal service, I can tell you, if it's bad news, whatever they report, double it. If it's good news, whatever they report, cut it in half. If they're saying, oh, the economic impact of this bill is going to be, $1 billion, well, you'll be lucky to get half a bill. And if it's bad news, like the cost, California, the cost of this high-speed rail is going to be $20 billion. Well, actually, it's going to be more like $130 billion if you ever get it, to run. And it'll cover about, half to a third of what you promised. So they always overpromise and underdeliver.
So we're not going to get into all of the theories around 9/11, but you had essentially a couple dozen people directly involved and caused a huge catastrophe, worst attack on American soil. And we are going to do a special on that, by the way, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't square. But let's take your number, Jeff. Let's say that 30 million illegals came in during that 4 years. And let's say that 1% of them were bad guys. That's 300,000 people who have ill intent.
Yeah.
And even if we go further and we said, well, let's take 1/10 of 1%, that's still 30,000 bad guys. Like, these are big, big numbers in the grand scheme of things. Randy, I mean, you served in GWAT. How much damage could 300,000 terrorists do to us?
Well, that I don't think there's many people out there that wouldn't understand when you say the number 300,000. But as you went with 1% bad guys, it's probably higher than that, I would imagine. And I'm with Jeff. It's probably closer to the 30 million, because you know how the Democrats count, right? It's just like they were Trump votes. We're going to throw some away over here. Okay, we'll count this one. We're going to switch this one. So what they actually counted is probably a lot less. And as we now know, from the pullout of Afghanistan, Iraq, initially when we left Iraq, they said it was a couple of billion dollars worth of equipment. And now with that total of Afghanistan, Iraq, it's probably around $100 billion of equipment they left. But they're never going to tell you that number. And just like we see these official numbers here, they're always less, because, again, they're not counting very well. And then they're not going to catch them all, as we mentioned earlier. There's plenty of people that came through that never got counted, never got talked to. So it's higher. And the amount, even 30,000, you think about it, in 30,000 people, but makes it a little bit more difficult. But in 50 states, you can hit some key areas with just 30,000. 300,000? Well, that's an army. That's an army.
Army.
That's right. That's an invading army is what we would do today. That's an invading army. So that tells you the kind of damage. Significant isn't even a good, prolific would be a better word. It would be widespread for sure.
So since you touched on the equipment that we left behind, I've mentioned briefly in the past that a good friend of mine, his father-in-law was the former Minister of Defense in Pakistan. And that friend of mine also does a lot of international arms dealing. And he was in Pakistan with his wife and visiting family. And he was sending me screenshots from this app in Pakistan that's similar to Facebook Marketplace. And you could buy M249 closed bolt M249 saws for $900 to $1,200. And it gets even worse. You could buy quad NVGs that cost our military $45,000 for under $1,000. I mean, so we armed a whole bunch of really bad people with some really high-end equipment. Now, granted, a lot of it they don't have the ability to fix, perhaps some of the larger stuff, but we certainly did a number on ourselves there for no good reason, right? So we'll move on to the next one here. And this is from Fox News. So illegal immigrants with terrorism ties will continue to exploit border. Homeland Security warns. The Homeland Threat Assessment also posed warnings related to the 2024 election cycle, which has seen 2 assassination attempts. So this is from last fall. We've got some stuff from this spring as well. But even before the election happened, illegal immigrants with terrorism ties are expected to exploit the U.S. borders. The threat environment remains high, the Department of Homeland Security warned Wednesday. Agency detailed a number of warnings in its annual threat assessment, which is used to inform local, state, and federal agencies about public safety and security threats, saying the terrorism threat environment over the next year will remain high. So I'm going to stop there, Jonathan, before I pass it off to you. I don't think that the threat level is going to remain high over the course of the next year. I think it's going to remain high for the balance of our lives because there's so many people in our country who hate us now.
I observed over the last 4 years thousands of military-age men walking across the border on a daily basis from every country that you can possibly imagine. But what's most disconcerting is that I don't know the exact number, but so many of them were from state sponsors of terror, countries that would like our country to fall and to go away. And so to stand there and to observe that and to see how Border Patrol was forced to babysit them instead of expelling them was difficult to, it felt like Groundhog Day every single day, and things just didn't make sense. On top of that, the Biden administration, demanded expedited processing for these people that were coming through the processing centers. And we had a very large processing center that was built here courtesy of the taxpayers. And I believe it was costing us about $2 million a day to house, to feed, and to do background checks. Well, I've been inside, had the opportunity to visit with most of the Border Patrol and or Homeland Security that came off of ports of entry in order to process. And they said the challenge with processing in that 48 to 52 hour time frame as demanded by the White House is that they weren't able to do an adequate job to determine who these people really were. Now we have massive trash bags full of IDs that they ditched when they came across the border. One of the things that you don't hear discussed very often is that Mexico was charging each and every individual as they came through their country $250 to $1,500 per ID. They had established residency, so the MPP protocols could be enforced, and because they had established residency in Mexico, but they ditched all of that. They ditched all of their money. They ditched their passports, ripped them up, tried to burn them, tried to get rid of who they were. In order to hide their true intent coming into this country. Yeah, it was mind blowing. I don't know how else to say it. It was difficult to fathom how this administration allowed that many people to come across the border. And on top of that, they removed the infrastructure, the cameras, and the lighting on our western border. Southwestern border. They took out all of the infrastructure that had been in place under the Trump administration, and they wouldn't do anything to replace it. And so we had most of the bad actors coming across in those areas directly around San Luis, and that little community was completely destabilized by the 3 cartels in and around that area, with over 500 assassinations since the Biden administration took office. So completely upended a fairly nice community where I had been crossing the border and going to dinner since I was 14 years old. But there was no way to possibly go back in those circumstances. When all of the politicians, when all of the law enforcement, state, local, and federal, were being targeted by the cartels because they wouldn't play ball, it got so bad that a year ago, the general that commanded the northern armies moved his forces up to the border and took control of San Luis and some of the other small communities around Mexicali and up into the mountains. Completely destabilized it. So it wasn't just bad for us, it was also bad for the Mexicans on the other side, especially with the murders. I mean, yeah, I could go on and on about that.
Well, you raise a good point, Jonathan, with regards to military-aged males. And I'm going to go to you, Randy, and then Jeff after that. This is the picture from the Fox News story that we just referenced. I just blew it up so we could see it. And I don't see a single geriatric person or a single female in the picture whatsoever. And I zoomed in on it. I zoomed my entire desktop in to have a closer look at it. Thoughts on just the number of military age men here, again, simply because you were in the military?
Well, as we mentioned a while ago, it's probably a lot more than 1%, right, that are bad guys. And I also mentioned that there would be professionals that came in. Those absolutely did. If everybody thinks that, because honest, here's the truth of it. The Biden, we'll just call it the Obama network, right? Because that's who this is. The Obama's network sent out the word, probably before Biden was elected, that it was turned to come on in, because these people just didn't get up and come on their own. Someone told them the door is open. Then they told them to ditch all those documents, right? So they could come in and be a anonymous person. And so when they're all military age males, how many of those do you think are here to assimilate? Probably not even half of them. It's a serious problem, because if you look at all the Islamic states and any of our enemies, this would be a perfect time to get in. I think it's been rumored 30 or 50,000 Chinese came in as well. And we know you can't just leave China because you want to and come to America. So it's not like 50,000 men just decided to come on to America. And then why would you come across the southern border if that was the case anyway? It's because our enemies saw their opportunity and they took it.
So, Randy, define the word professionals that you used when you opened your comments.
I'm talking about the people that are real terrorists, not the guy that just tried to look it up on the internet. These are people that have been over in their countries in these Islamic states already conducting terrorism.
Gotcha.
Some of them, certainly if they came from Afghanistan, Iraq, or anywhere in that area, or any of them that joined in after it started and came in there and played around, they now have real experience against American soldiers. So at that point, you become a pro at being a terrorist. And that's the kind of folks we're talking about. We're not talking about some guy that just decided to come on in and maybe he'll become a bad guy when he gets here. No, that's what these people do where they came from, and that's what they're coming here to do.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for the clarification. So, Jeff, I mean, CIA, you were deployed in Afghanistan at one point in time. How big is the threat here? Because we keep hearing that there's something imminent, right? Tom Holman this week even said it's just a matter of time. And I believe that, but I want to hear your perspective as a professional.
Well, I mean, a foreign adversary would be foolish not to take advantage of this. And they're not that stupid. So, yeah, they took advantage of it. But what strikes me about this photo, you have all these young men. And there's no old men, there's no old women, there's no little kids, and there's no women. And I keep thinking back to China when they had the one-child policy, and they would sex select abortions to get rid of the girls because they all wanted boys to take care of them when they got old. Well, now they have like 70 million more men than they have women. Well, you're importing millions of men who are going to, men being men, hormones being hormones, they're going to want a girl. And what are they going to end up doing? I think you're going to see a huge increase in rapes. I think you're going to see a huge increase in violence from these basic frustrated young men who can't find a wife, can't have a family. I mean, I used to recruit people in the Middle East by saying, you come work for me, I'll give you enough money that you can afford to get married. And that would sway them because they wanted to get married. These guys, the ones who aren't terrorists and who aren't criminals, if they do want a life, that means they want to have a family. Well, where are the women? They're going to try and come here, and then they're going to be frustrated because it's not going to work for them. Because what do they have to offer? Not a lot. And I think you're going to see a lot of frustration, rapes and murders and crime. So like the incels who can't get a date and then go shoot up a college in Montreal. I'm waiting for that one.
Besides the boats, I think that's what they brought them here for, Jeff.
It may be. I mean, you look what happened to Lake and Riley. That was some little loser who couldn't get a date. So he rapes and murders this girl.
So, Jeff, would you draw a direct parallel to what's happened in Europe? I can't remember which year it was, but one year on New Year's Eve.
Oh, they had just massive amounts of rapes. That was in Germany. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same thing. They have all these young men, mostly they're from Syria and Afghanistan and North Africa, but it's the same thing. They come in, they have this image in their mind that all these pretty European girls are going to want to date them and go to bed with them. And then when it doesn't happen, they get frustrated and they act out and they end up raping people.
So just a quick number, and it's a ballpark number, but I've read it several times, several different sources. 50% of Chinese men who are 40 years or younger will never be married and will never have kids as a result of the one-child policy that the CCP enforced for all those years. So pivoting to the next one, Jonathan, and this is kind of related to terrorism, but it's the crime spree aspect of it. And, the radical increase in crime in some jurisdictions. If you don't mind, speak to that in your particular part of Arizona, what's happened over the past 4 years.
Well, I think that there are so many different crimes that we can talk about. the cartels, essentially the border was turned over to the cartels. They were actually in charge of the people that were coming across. And if you came across, you owed them a debt, whether or not you could pay cash. And we have video of people paying cash. And then we have the other arrangements afterwards that include prostitution. National Sheriff Association is extremely concerned about almost the doubling of prostitution here in the United States. So that's one crime. But then you have got the violent, aggressive crime. You've got a lot of people who owe the cartels, as I mentioned, and so then they become their henchmen, and they do anything that they can do in order to repay that debt. It was estimated in about 2019 that up to 75% of all manual labor in the LA basin was undocumented. And so you have a tremendous amount of people who've come to the country under the guise of seeking a better life, but the cartels have suppressed them. They never actually rise up, and they become part of this underground network with low level to high level crime. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about a story from a couple of years ago where they intercepted some RPGs down below Fort Huachuca that were coming across the border. So you talk about some type of a terror event. I think that we have missed a lot of the trafficking of arms that has come across the border. You mentioned 9/11 earlier. They identified several cells that were operating south of the border. I believe that they are still there. I'm told that they're still there, working working in lockstep with the cartels. Every single one of the 9/11 hijackers came through Yuma, Arizona, over to Tucson. Jeff, where you're at, and San Diego, this has been a hotbed of that activity. And so the crime that we have seen as it pertains to the human trafficking and or narcotics, and then the result of people being trafficked in any and every way to do whatever the cartels want them to do. I don't think that I've ever seen anything like it before. And I can't imagine the horror of some of these families with what they've had to live through. I've read several of the interviews. I met several of the mothers at DOJ. I was invited by Pam Bondi to be there with President Trump, and to sit next to those mothers and fathers who have had their daughters and children taken from them. I had one of the mothers come to my house to sit down and visit for a couple of hours from Texas, and the horror that they expressed for what their children had to endure at the hands of these people who have come across illegally, who are frustrated, who are in no means part of society. They are preying on the weakest, they are preying on the outliers, and they are preying upon the least of these, to quote a scripture. They don't care. They do not value life. I've been in 35 plus countries. I've seen how these people treat each other in their home countries. There's no way that we can expect them to treat anybody differently here. And I believe that it's only going to get worse unless Homan can do everything that he can do to expel them. I appreciate what he's done with some of the gang and cartel members. I cannot believe that the Democrats want to afford them any type of process when they have been the scourge to our society over the last 4 years.
I'm with you 100% there. Just a quick note. It was probably a year and a half ago, we had Victor Avila on, who was one of the two DEA agents shot up in the Fast and Furious debacle. His partner, Agent Zapata, died in his arms. He told me 18 months ago that America is the world leader in child sex trafficking. My jaw just about hit the ground when I heard that. And he went on to say that TDA and these other highly opportunistic criminal organizations have an easier time bringing trafficked children into America and then sending them elsewhere in the world than if they sent them directly from their country of origin to wherever they were exporting to. It's an absolutely horrific, fact for us as Americans.
Chris,
yeah, go ahead.
can I just say something real quick about that?
Absolutely.
In the second year of the Biden administration, the sheriff called me down to the border one afternoon to talk to the agents. And in talking to those agents, they were processing a group of children. He said, Jonathan, we've identified 5,000 children so far this year that have been trafficked through Yuma, more than 3 times. So these kids were being rented out to become a family unit and then being brought back, and then they would disappear. And then fast forward another year, we submitted some information for requests to several congressmen. I think at that point in time, they had identified 50,000 kids that had gone missing in federal custody. Senator or Congressman Biggs then submitted another request, and the number was up to 85,000. And then it just kept growing up to where it was over 400,000 children who had been trafficked in the United States, and their whereabouts are unknown. Now, one of my good friends who was the sector chief in Yuma was hired by HHS to go in and build a program that ICE could use in order to go and traffic down. They've been able to restore about 80,000 children. But all of this happened on top of the Biden administration denying Border Patrol the use of DNA testing to be able to prove that these kids belong to the families.
Yeah.
And so they were trafficked with a purpose.
Just a couple quick comments on that. Number one, JJ Carroll said the number is well in excess of 1 million. It's not in the tens or hundreds of thousands. Number two, when JJ was interviewing people for his documentaries, thisistrreason.com, he interviewed somebody from DHS who couldn't reveal, their name and face. They were anonymized essentially. And this person said they went to their supervisor and said, this child is being sent to this address, and we've already sent 50 children to the same residential address. How do we notify somebody higher up? And the immediate superior said, don't do it. Just let them push them to that address, because it's a lot less work for us. If you start sticking your nose into this, then we're going to have a whole bunch more work on our plate. And just don't do that. Just turn a blind eye. It's incomprehensible. The level of evil for somebody to say something like that. I can't even get my head wrapped around it, to be honest with you. Randy, I'm going to come to you next here. It's interesting that you would mention China, Randy. So this article that's on screen right now, the reporter got some government reports and kind of summarized them in this article. Listen to this. The report documents how Chinese gangs have cornered the black market for marijuana in Oklahoma, with roughly 3,000 illegal immigrant growers operating under Chinese mafia control, selling 18 billion to 40 billion yearly in illicit cannabis. These operations involve human trafficking, violence, drug trafficking, money laundering, and environmental destruction. So you've got the criminal aspect, and then you have the aspect that there was a report that came out last year that said at least 30,000 spec ops Chinese soldiers could be confirmed to be in the country that walked across our southern border and had in turn set up shop close to critical infrastructure. There's a whole lot of different angles here with the Chinese, Randy. It's close to you. It's in your backyard. I affectionately call Oklahoma Texas North, but don't be offended if you're from Oklahoma. But Randy, I'm curious why you brought up the Chinese.
Well, when we were talking about, the amount of folks that come across the border, and then about how with the percentage of people that came with criminal intent, we know it's higher than 1%. And then I just had to, you know what I mean? We know that there's from an Islamic State, but I also want to include always to remind folks, hey, the Chinese came across the border too. And and again, that's even more specific, right? Because you could, I guess, hypothetically say all these other people may have wanted to leave their country and then came on in for a better life, right? But we know that amount of Chinese men are not going to just be able to leave China on their own. And
Right.
even if they did leave China, they would have come through the Pacific. They wouldn't have come all the way around the planet to come in the southern border unless they were here for nefarious reasons and here illegally. That's why I brought them up, because when this all goes down, it won't just be these other people that we talked about that are going to help whatever's coming. It's definitely going to be those Chinese folks that came in. One of the other things that I was on that panel, I think Jeff was too, with the guy a year and a half ago, and it was heartbreaking, and all the stuff him and JJ talk about. It's pretty crazy. You Americans, we used to didn't put up with that kind of thing around here. We didn't. I don't know what happened and how we got to this point, but we didn't used to put up with this, and certainly not in Texas or Oklahoma or Arizona. It's crazy, but we also have to realize that the Chinese are our biggest problem. Even with all these guys that came, all these other immigrants that came in, the Chinese and the China, the CCP is our biggest issue and will be for quite some time to come. That's why I mentioned them, and they're into everything. Heck, they're already come in and making that much money off a pot out of one state, probably doing it in multiple other states. But you got to wonder, okay, people, where's all that money going? What are they doing with it? They're not just buying more pot.
Right. That's a great question. Jeff, I want to pivot ever so slightly for your comments on this. This article on screen essentially ends by saying these aren't just poor refugees. Some are career criminals exploiting progressive, policies at the border. I hadn't really thought about it in that context before. Maybe you could speak to that. Like, were there individuals around the world that weren't affiliated with anybody, but they're career criminals and thought, gee, this is like shooting fish in a barrel. I think I'll go to America. You're on mute, Jeff.
Absolutely. Because, like I said, you'd rather rob a poor guy or a rich guy. We're the richest country in the world. So you want to rob the rich guy. And we've already seen it with the criminal tourism, where the gangs from South America fly into the United States, go through an airport, have a visa, they go into Hollywood, Beverly Hills, they rob people, and then they leave before anyone can figure out who they are. And we've seen it over and over again. I mean, there was a gang of them that robbed the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, and they got caught because they were stupid enough to be driving around town in the merch that they stole from his house, including his uniform. But yeah, I mean, sure, why wouldn't you? If you're a professional criminal, you'd go where the getting's good.
Makes a lot of sense.
You're not gonna go to Somalia.
Go ahead, Jonathan. You're on mute, Jonathan.
Our sector chief started to post the pictures of the criminals that were detained in Yuma and every one of their counts that had been charged against them. And after about 4 months, he was told by his command in DC that he could no longer do that. He was identifying each and every criminal that was coming across, that was coming through the Yuma sector, and there would be 2 to 3 a day. People who were bad people who were known associates of terrorist organizations. And he was told to stop it.
And incredible. I just want to pivot back to China for 1 second. I just want to tack this on to what Randy had to say. You don't just decide to leave China. The CCP controls everybody who leaves and enters, and you don't just decide, well, I think I'm going to take a flight and go somewhere else. You have to have permission to leave the country, and it's very tightly controlled. We've already spoken to violent crime.
Chris, the tap to that is, what that means is China sent them on orders, people. They get orders to be here, and those are not good orders for us.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting that fine point on it. We've spoken to violent crime, so we won't dissect this article from Marsha Blackburn, but if you have a minute, it's very well written and summarizes. It's actually a really, really good summary of the violent crime that has infected our country. So we'll move on to the next one. We don't need to talk about this too much. We've already kind of talked about it, but our friend Tom Holman, this was published June 3rd of this year, 3 days ago. Tom Homan convinced U.S. will see major terror attack because of Biden's lax border policies. It's coming. We've, of course, shared all kinds of intelligence, some of it open source, some of it not open source, of these pretty crazy terrorist plots. And I'm going to leave that for Jeff to describe. But do you want to add anything else, Jonathan, on the terrorist front?
Well, I had 17 states attorney generals come 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago, and Tom was going to come with them. But these states attorney generals wanted to understand exactly what was happening on the ground because it was ending up on their front doorstep throughout this country. And they have had some type of a briefing with Director Homan and Pam Bondi talking about these criminal organizations being here, being rooted in our communities. One of the things that we didn't even touch on is some of the things that have happened with some of the Mexican cartels over the last few weeks. People who have ingrained themselves into communities up in Oregon, Northern California, back east, and they're finally going in, identifying them and picking them up. But they have been here for a while, and now we understand that the cartels are working together against the United States military, that they've joined with the Chinese, and they are working with other people. So I think that they are all working in cahoots now to plot our downfall.
Well, it was mentioned on another panel that the Mexican cartels now are not just the regular criminals that we used to know the cartels to be. They were Mexican special operations guys that have now turned into cartels.
Yep.
Even worse than that, a number of those Mexican spec op soldiers came to America, were trained by our military, and then exported that intelligence back to Mexico.
Yeah.
We don't give them every secret when we train foreign, that was part of a Green Berets job. It's called Foreign Internal Defense. You don't give them the whole playbook, but you give them enough to make them dangerous. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's the operative word. So Tom Homan goes on to say that his biggest fear is the 2 million known gotaways. He says they scare the hell out of me. And Tom Homan made this warning because the Egyptian national who was on an expired work visa carried out the anti-Semitic attack in Colorado. Jeff, we've had intel for at least 3 decades now on Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Hezbollah in particular wanting to carry out swarm attacks in America. Could you explain that for our audience, for anybody who's not familiar with the concept?
Well, yeah, there's the drone swarm, which is different. This one is, you attack, I don't know, pick a target, pick a school. You attack a school, and then all the police respond to that school. While they're at that school, you attack something else across town or the next city over. Meanwhile, that's in Nebraska. Then 6 hours later, another attack in New Mexico or Illinois or somewhere else. What you do is you keep the government, you keep the response off balance by doing multiple attacks within a short time frame to stretch the response and to give you more time on target so you can do more damage.
It's downright devious. I think Keith Graves from Christian Warrior Training might be the one who mentioned this. But actually, I lost my train of thought. Dang it. I should have written it down. My sometimer's just kicking back in again. It'll come back to me.
Chris, to tack on to what he just said, that's exactly the tactic that the cartels were using, pushing hordes of people across in one spot. And then 2 miles down the road, they're flying drones or pushing fentanyl and other narcotics between the ports. And so they're not going to change their playbook. They're going to keep using it. Why? Because it works.
I remembered it now. So you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I think this, like I said, came from Keith Graves. He said that when this stuff is war gamed out, he said, when you have all these swarm attacks, and not only are they happening in multiple locations today, they happen again tomorrow. Parents don't send their kids to school tomorrow or thereafter. And by the third day, they don't even go to work themselves. and the economy grinds to a complete halt, like everything grinds to a halt. Is that a realistic time frame, Jeff? You're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, how long are people gonna? You can't leave your kid home alone, and if you don't trust the schools, you're not going to send them to school, so you can stay home with your kids. Now, during COVID, yeah, you could maybe work from home, but not everybody has that luxury. But if you do attack like this at a grocery store, you do one at a school, you do one, you do them at places where people have to go. People don't want to go to any of those places. Who's going to go grocery shopping if you have 2 terrorist attacks on large grocery stores in your town? Nobody.
Well, what grocery store is even going to have any stock on the shelves if people don't go to work and the supply chain falls apart?
Yeah, because think about if people stay home with their kids, then you attack a bunch of grocery stores, so they are afraid to go out and buy food. You're just making it worse and worse and worse.
Well, there's an old adage that says we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with that. Look at what people will do for a TV on Black Friday. Imagine if they have no food.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be a complete disaster. Randy, do you want to touch on the swarm stuff at all?
Well, I think they covered it very well, but that's exactly what they said. It'll be multiple attacks that then attack your safety to where then people, what is terrorism? It is to scare the public or an entity into doing something you want it to do or not do, and basically changing the normal routine of things. And that's exactly what would happen. And you think about it, we really haven't experienced that in this country yet. We really haven't. Are we really prepared? We don't even know. I know that, remember on some of the panels, I've talked about several times that the CIA last year, all throughout the year, kept saying, hey, there was going to be a major attack on the power grid. They just put another one out this week saying the same thing. And I'm like, okay, well, what have we done about it? If y'all know there's going to be an attack, what have we done about it? And then going back to the Chinese, we know about those 9 substations that would take out the whole country. And we know there are Chinese by them right now, today. So who do you think is going to carry out that attack? And then you will see once the power grid goes down, that would be part of the swarm, right? Because then that's going to slow response. That's going to slow getting the word out about other events taking place at the same time. And boy, what a nightmare that could turn into be.
Well, somebody mapped this out, and it may have been the girl who was on Sean Ryan's show a couple times. Basically said they will not attack the grid right out of the gate because they want people to know what horrific things that they've done. So it'll be the swarm attacks, then they'll shut the power off and data networks and all the things go with it. But they want that fear to spread like lightning.
Yeah, no, that's perfect sense. That's exactly what they would do.
Sarah is her name. I can't recall her last name, but we have 55,000 substations in the country. We have 3 grids, east, west, and Texas, that occasionally connect to shunt power from one to another. But as Randy just said, 9 of them are critical junctures. If you take those 9 substations out, you knock out power to 95% of America. The only people who would still have electricity from a power plant would be the ones that are in close proximity to the power plants. And then the next part to that is that when Trump left office, replacement transformers were 18 months lead time from Germany and parts of Asia. That number today is over 4 years. So if we had, a number of these transformers knocked out, we don't have a stash of them. And, it could literally put us back in the 1800s.
Yeah, we have no backup on these things. And these are the very high voltage ones. These aren't just your regular
700,000 kV. That's correct. Yeah. So, all right, moving on to the next one here that I've already got it up on screen. So, Colorado attack proves America needs some common sense on immigration. Stop importing terrorism. We've already discussed that, but here's one of the, reactions. The Senate Republican aims to treat visa overstayers like illegal entrants in response to Colorado terror attack. I'll go to you first, Jonathan. And I don't know if any of y'all have a number on this. I don't have it. But what's the estimated number of people here who are visa overstayers?
I think it's in the millions.
I think that's probably safe. safe ballpark, right?
Yeah.
And
I
how
don't have
much?
any, I don't have an exact number, but how many students have come here and overstayed their visa, right? Even after they've graduated from school, and you've seen what's happened at some of these universities, they've come back to be the activists, or they've, come onto the campuses and caused, tons of hate and discontent.
Mhm.
And, I appreciate what the president has done, shutting down grants to these universities that are facilitating these students coming onto the campus and getting everybody riled up. It's an insurrection. I mean, it's nothing short of an insurrection. And they're sent here and they're being paid. And then you get into the, nefarious bad actors that on the world stage that are part of the No Borders crowd. And I think that we all know who we're talking about, who are paying people to come out and protest and to cause uh, this division within our society that otherwise wouldn't necessarily exist unless you had these paid protesters
Right.
causing this hate and discontent over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to point out one more thing here. So this is a report, as you can probably see, it's 49 pages long. The historic dollar costs of DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas open border policies, interim report, Committee on Homeland Security majority report, November 13th, 2023. So this is going back a couple of years ago. And if the only reason I'm putting it up here, not for discussion, unless you guys want to add anything, but here's another source where you can go and kind of get some dollars and cents numbers and try to get your head wrapped around them. And again, I think everybody on the panel would agree. You can take whatever comes up there and at least double it, maybe more. Jeff, Randy, Jonathan, do any of you want to make any further comments on the monetary piece or just move on?
Well, I had a subpoena from Chairman Green to appear before the Homeland Security and testify, and that was a fun experience. And it was just interesting how disconnected the Democrats were on that panel. And when I would talk about the value or the impact on our small community, they seemed to discount it and just not even care. I had two of them come up to me afterwards, and their comment to me was, "Sorry about the theatrics." They didn't care. They only wanted the soundbite, and they don't care about us. They don't care about our communities, and it's evident from the way that they behave. They do not lend credence to anything that we were there to discuss, and it was just so frustrating.
We appreciate that. So we're in the home stretch here. A question for all three of you. Then I have one more topic to cover. We'll wrap it up. But it's Roy's question here. Randy, you first, then Jeff, then Jonathan. And the question is, so what can we do now to prevent and not just react to them? And I'm assuming he's meaning the terrorists and probably the criminals as well. So Randy, you're first.
Well, that's a very good question, and it's unfortunate because I don't know that there's anything you can do right this moment. One, keep your head on a swivel. If you see something that doesn't look right, you should probably report it. That's just, that's going to be the best case because right now, I don't know if it's going to turn out to be like England, but there for a while, if any of the Arabic folks, the Muslims came out, they could inflict any kind of violence on the street that they wanted to and nothing happened. But the moment the general population tried to stop them or intervene and do a little violence themselves, they were the ones arrested. So you got to be careful with that. It's going to depend on what state you're in and what your leadership looks like to whether you can actually do something yourself without going to prison. So preventing it, this didn't happen overnight, and we're not going to get rid of it overnight, but we have to start somewhere. And I would say that's paying attention. And then, reach out to your congressmen and your senators. That's one of the things citizens can do. Flood their office with calls and emails. They'll eventually listen.
Thanks, Randy. So I just want to make a quick statement here that there will always be a reckoning. So, for example, if people think that they're in a WROL situation, world without rule of law, and that they can get away with committing some heinous crime like murdering somebody, raping somebody, whatever the case may be, there's always a reckoning. It always happens eventually, right? And so even with a breakdown in our society, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to give a shameless plug to our friends at CCW Safe. They by far have the very best self-defense coverage in the country. They don't sell you insurance, which can be invalidated if you take a plea deal. They're the only ones who've successfully defended a murder one charge. They're the only ones who deploy an emergency team immediately, regardless where you are in the country. And they also will cover any civil judgments against you. So am I biased? Yeah, but we took 18 months to dissect every single company out there and settled on CCW Safe for that reason. There's a link down below. Jeff, your advice for people in light of the terrorists and criminals that have been admitted to the country, what can they do?
Well, what Randy said, contact your congressman and, and all these people and let them know. But what we as a country need to do, okay, first, you stop the bleeding, which we've done. The border's not 100% shut down, but it's pretty darn close. Then we got to do triage, and we've got to find these people and kick them out. I love how they said we want 3,000 deportations a day. That's great. We need more, but start with the bad guys first, the really bad guys, and get them out. Kick them the hell out of here, and don't let them back in. And with it for the Democrats, you almost want to say, okay, you don't want us to kick them out. Okay, we're going to put them in your district, and they have to stay in your district. In fact, Nancy Pelosi, we're going to put them in your house. We're going to put up a tent in your lawn, on your lawn, and you deal with them. They don't want that, but they should have to feel the pain, the direct result of their crappy policies.
Didn't we try that in Martha's Vineyard?
Oh, yeah, look what happened. People, man, they scream bloody murder. But I tell you what, it got a lot of attention.
It sure did. Jonathan, batting cleanup on what people can do.
First of all, get involved. I started with my house, right? That's my first sphere of influence. And with 11 kids, I put them all through situational awareness classes with retired law enforcement who gave them the good and the bad and the ugly of what happens when you don't pay attention. Second, again, get involved in your community. Support your state, local, and federal law enforcement, and give them the tools that they need, or ask that they be given the tools that they need in order to confront terrorism on a domestic front. And then hold your elected officials accountable on all levels, asking them how they're engaging with. I'm asked every day to engage as a county supervisor with my state legislature and with my federal representatives. And one day does not go by without being asked by a citizen of the community to ask about a concern that they have. And guess what? When people are notified, our elected officials, and being elected officials, when somebody calls me with a concern, guess what? People start to pay attention. One person, okay. Two people, yeah, okay. We've got a trend that's growing. But when you have not necessarily a coordinated campaign, but when you've got people contacting them saying, hey, we demand some action, then it returns to government by the people and for the people, rather than being regulated from Washington, D.C., being told what pill we're going to swallow. So we just need a lot more people being active participants in the entire process. And if that happens, for the most part, we'll win most of the elections. And then again, hold them accountable. Once they get there, we need to remind them why we sent them. Why are we having such a challenge to passing this bill? I know we've still got diverse interests there, but why is it national security at the foremost mind of every elected official that's there? And why aren't our constituents telling them, hey, you need to secure the border, and you need to give Border Patrol and all of the other alphabet agencies the tools that they need to stop a terrorist attack here in the United States?
I appreciate that, Jonathan. I would just drop down to like a lower level and counsel everybody to stack up your preps at all times. If you have food stockpiled, means to purify water, ammunition, power backups, all those sort of things. It's kind of like eating an elephant. Just do little bits and pieces at a time. Before you know it, you've got a pretty good stash of stuff. And our new partner at Carnivalt is the only company out there that is selling high quality freeze-dried meat. And I'm going to give them a shameless plug, carnivalt.com. Link is down below. Their meat has no mRNA in it. It's grass finished, not just grass fed. Grass fed means the last few weeks they bulk them up on grains, and they have all the, the negative consequences of that. But Carnivalt don't add any flavor. You can reconstitute it. You take hot water in a thermos, for crying out loud, reconstitute it on the trail if you were hiking, and 25-year shelf life. So you don't even need freezers to store this high quality meat. So check out carnivalt.com. I'm just ecstatic to be working with them, to be quite honest. They're our kind of company. The next,
Chris,
yes, sir.
when Jamie Dimon is telling people to forget crypto and stock up on guns and ammo, when America's
exactly
top
right.
banker is asking people to pay attention and to stock up on guns and ammo, why isn't that getting more coverage and more press?
Yeah, great. That's a $64,000 question, but great point. I appreciate you adding it. We can briefly touch on this, but we're going to wrap up here. So one of the costs that we didn't get too deep into is the cost to each of us for housing and the strain that's been placed on our housing supply. And if New York City is struggling with $5 billion spent on shelters, and it looks like it's going to be $10 billion this year, by the way, for 2025. And then you have other smaller cities. I think this is Springfield, Ohio, in this particular one. Jeff, just quickly speak to how this is hitting us in the pocketbook, all of us. You're on mute.
It's very simple. It's supply and demand. If you have a lot of demand for housing and a small supply of housing, the price goes up. And what you're doing, and you think, well, that won't affect me. Illegals aren't going to be living in my neighborhood. Well, they push people out of the low-income neighborhoods and then move up to a slightly higher one and push people out of that. It does eventually push up. Because the people in the lower end who may have just enough money to get to one step higher will go there because they don't have a choice. There is nothing down there. And yeah, it's just simple economics. Supply and demand. The other one is anything you subsidize, you get more of. And we've been subsidizing illegal immigration for 4 years.
That's very well said. Jonathan, Randy, do either one of you want to speak to the cost of housing?
Well, I think that an audit is called for, and we've seen so much money being abused and misused and stolen and rerouted to different places. I don't know if those are the actual costs. I know that a lot of people, and they've highlighted the NGOs, non-governmental organizations nationwide who have profited from the illegal activity coming across the border at prices and costs that seem to not make any sense. I've seen some of the audits, and they absolutely do not make any sense on what it costs to take care of somebody. And so I think that there's a whole lot of people that need to be held accountable for obfuscating the truth. And then we need to quit spending that money. I mean, we're headed for a depression, and we've outspent ourselves, and it seems as if that continues to be the game, and that's exactly what they were doing.
I appreciate it, Jonathan. Randy, you got final kick at the can here for our main topic.
Well, I think we covered the costs. I just want to make two final points before we got off here in relation to this whole topic that we've been covering. It's thank God for Doge, right? And then and we got rid of, USAID, USAIP. All those were putting out all that money. And then the third one that we didn't even know about, that didn't even have a name. And it was spitting out billions, 14 computers spitting out checks every day, nonstop, billions a year. All that, because Jonathan mentioned earlier that those few elite that we know who we're talking about, they weren't spending their own money.
Our money.
They were spending our money. At least we cut that part off. Now, the old Bidens gave enough money away at the end there. They probably filled those coffers a little bit, but it's going to run out. I think if we hadn't have cut those pieces off, we would see a lot more in the streets right now already, but It isn't being funded like it was in 2020. So that is my biggest point of this whole thing. Thank God we cut those purse strings off, because that's the money they were actually using, not their own. And then lastly, hey, let's give one for the Democrats. They finally got Abreu back, right?
Yeah.
That's how we do it. We just bring him back and pull him up on charges and put him in prison. Hey, we can live with that one. We can live with that one.
I appreciate it, Randy. So I'll wrap up just by saying this, that, the border invasion was step one, and now we're contending with an assault on everything that you can imagine. It's our national identity, it's our sovereignty, it's our economy. Like, there's all kinds of aspects of this, as well as the terrorism and crime factors as well. And the only thing that I've got to add is I would, reiterate what Jonathan said: be vocal. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Speak up and out against it. Quick shout out to Roger Moore, one of our guardians, for posting the story of the day in our private Signal chat. And this is a really interesting video. I was hoping we'd have time to play it, but we're running long. And I know some of our panel members have places to be, but it's a plan. It was written, it was published, it's known. Hungarian PM Viktor Orban exposes George Soros' 2015 plan to deliberately flood the EU with at least 1 million asylum seekers annually. So if you go on Substack and you just do a search on Viktor Orban, or this is posted by a gentleman named Lionel T., you can go ahead and watch the video there. It's worth your time. I want to just quickly say that tonight's episode, dedicating to my good boy Billy, who died precisely 1 year ago today from cancer at 11 and a half years old. His brother died of cancer at 6 years old. That's my wife underneath that 92-pound pit bull. He slept on top of her every night, and I would wake up in the middle of the night because she would wake up in the middle of the night unable to breathe because he was planted firmly on top of her. He's one of the best dogs we ever had. He was absolutely incredible.
Beautiful dog.
He was a good boy. So other than that, Jonathan, greatly appreciate you joining us tonight. Hope to see you again.
Yes, sir.
And Jeff, Randy, of course, always appreciate your time and insight. This is Chris Evans signing off. God bless America.
God bless America.
Do you ever feel it? That something is wrong with the world, like a splinter in your mind? The Matrix isn't fiction. It's real. A prison built not of walls, but of lies. I saw it young. Hollywood dreams, silicon toys, news anchors with plastic smiles. All tools. Tools to shape perception, to cage thought. Behind the curtain, puppet masters move. They don't wear uniforms, they don't need guns. They run psyops so refined, the Army's ghost human seems quaint. These are the true threats to America, to Trump's success. You ask who they are. If I told you, would you even believe me? Their network hums not in Congress or courts, but in the cold, sterile halls of globalist think tanks. Foundations with friendly names, but sinister goals. They fund chaos, open borders, climate hysteria, digital leashes. They write the scripts, censor the dissent, push CBDCs to track your every step. But I see through it, and so does he. Did you think the last administration was in charge? Orders signed with an auto pen while the world burned. Now Trump's returned. MAGA isn't a campaign, it's a counterattack. Knight to F3. The center seized, but the board is still crowded. Bureaucrats, media pawns, globalist bishops. They will not surrender the game, because Trump is the one variable they cannot control. Unbought, unbroken, the voice of the people. And if the people ever wake up, if they ever see the psyop for what it is, they'll burn the system to the ground. The real war has only just begun.